Hey! Hello everyone, I am so excited for this week. This is the one I'm most excited about. Well, okay, I guess I should say this is one of the ones that I'm most excited about when it comes to objective personality and just different aspects that they have included in their system. And that would be saviors and demons. I've been kind of tippy-toeing and dancing around it. I haven't been using these words, saviors and demons, but when we talk about imbalances, when we talk about a major focus versus a minor focus, that's the terminology I chose to use. It is referring to one of the side of the coins being a savior and the other side of the coin being a demon. And so when we're looking really at that major focus, it's like the savior will save me, and then the avoiding the demon because it just doesn't have as much value. When you think about it in a nutshell, the saviors and the demons of your personality are the mechanisms which cause the reoccurring life problems, the life patterns that you kind of fall into, because they are a result of overvaluing certain things, certain aspects of your personality, what you are made up of, your thoughts and your feelings and your observations, and undervaluing the other side of the coin of those thoughts, feelings, and observations. When we're talking about saviors and demons, we can be talking about letter, like thinking versus feeling. We can even branch it out even further and say, well, the functions. I have savior FE, and so then I have demon TI. But then we can also look at the animals. You can say I have savior blast and demon consume. The pattern is reoccurring when it comes to the letters, the functions, and the animals. I'm going to be putting up a table again. It shows the kind of the coin value of this, because when we're talking about savior versus demon, we are definitely talking about the coins, one side versus the other side. So the first thing is responsibility. A savior will take that responsibility, meaning the person themselves will take the responsibility to do whatever that savior is. So if my savior is TE, then I take the responsibility to go out to hear other people's reasons and rationale, and I bring it all in and I take it in, and that is going to help me make a decision. So on the flip side, if you had demon, then you really don't take the responsibility. That is what we would call a void. You're leaving a void in your life because you're not taking the responsibility and you're letting others do it for you, whether you realize it or not. That's the thing. We don't necessarily realize that we're doing this. We are thinking we might be doing this, but then the others around us are looking at us and saying, "Are you sure you're doing that? I think I'm having to do that for you." And we don't even realize it. So another aspect would be your perception of it. So it's kind of interesting because when it comes to saviors versus demons, a lot of times we don't necessarily perceive the saviors because it's almost like they're happening on autopilot. It's just like natural second nature to you. And so you're not even like, your brain is taking very low levels of energy to do this stuff because it's what it naturally does. It just works that way. You might also say that it's obvious to you. It's like, oh my gosh, you made a table to put all the information in? Well, yeah, of course. It makes it easy to understand. So there you go. So there is SI happening for you right there, because it's like, well, of course you're going to do that. Why wouldn't you do that? And so with the demon side of the coin, your perception of it is, it's almost like your brain wakes up. It's no longer just humming along, doing the things that it normally does, but all of a sudden it's like, what what is happening here? I am awake. I am noticing it. This is the area where it can go in two different directions. You either are in a good state and you might be what we call in objective personality, you're peacocking it because you secretly want to be good at whatever this is. And so you might say, oh yes, I do that all the time, because that's when you wake up, your brain is awake and noticing that you're actually doing that. And then the other side is more like when you don't necessarily put yourself into it, but when it gets thrust upon you, that is where you get that fear and the pain and you want to avoid it. So your perception of it is either really good, like, oh yes, I'm the best, or really bad, I hate this, get me out of here. So it's not balanced. And to add to this one, because I find it very interesting, because when it comes to compliments, when you get a compliment for doing something that is your savior, it's kind of like you toss it out the window. You're like, yeah, got it. Okay, sure. All right, fine. Thanks. Okay. Because it's like, doesn't everybody do this? This is what I feel responsible to do. But then when it comes to your demon and somebody compliments you in your demon, then it feels special because it's like, yes, I want people to see this about me, especially when I'm in a good state of it and a positive state of it happening. We'll secretly want those kind of compliments because it's highlighting the things that we actually are awaken up and we see them and we notice them and we're like, look at what I'm doing here. And then somebody says, look at what you're doing there. And you're like, yeah. The interesting thing is that a lot of times we'll see that part of ourselves, the part of ourselves that we're not doing all the time, but feels very special, and we'll think that is us all the time. And the thing is, I think this is a good time to kind of put this in here right now, is everyone can do everything. And so you are all these things. You are the things that you're doing all the time. You're all the things that you're doing some of the time. This is all you. But what is also you is these imbalances, maybe some really big imbalances, because you're doing so much of the savior and so little of the demon that it's causing problems. And some analogies to kind of think through these, because sometimes it is helpful to kind of get a visual picture of them. You can think of a savior as like you can think of both of them as like a muscle. But a savior will be a very well-toned, well-developed muscle, whereas the demon will be the less developed muscle. And if you think back to a time, and this happens to me all the time because I'm not very active, but when I do something, like let's say I do a sprint of running because I had to chase Sola out, out the backyard or whatever, and the next day I'm really feeling it. It's like, whew, man, I haven't worked those muscles in a long time. Well, that's exactly what's happening with the demons. You really notice them because it's like, whew, haven't done that in a long time. Some things to think about is to go through what it is not. This could be a factor, but it is not a defining factor. We are not necessarily talking about momentary performance. So what that means is that I'm not talking about I'm looking at a snapshot of what you did right now, and that's going to define you as a big whole person. No, we want to look at the big picture, not just you in this snapshot, not even just you in that snapshot. We want to look at you as a whole. When we look at your entire life, if I were to spend like an entire 2-3 months with you and get to know you better and live with you and get to see where you are freaking out, where you are taking things very calmly. And that's what I'm going to pick up and take and make note of when it comes to what part of your personality is your savior and what is your demon. So a savior is not necessarily something you're good at, and a demon is not necessarily something you're bad at. In fact, a lot of times, by the time somebody gets to their demon, they've done a lot of their saviors, and so their demon can be maybe ready to share. So like if I had blast demon, and so I've taken a lot of time to process it, to gather the information, and then I get to the time where I'm about to blast, it might be really good because I've taken my time to build it up. But where it might be a demon is I'm not always letting it happen. That's the thing. I might get stuck in that sleeping, consuming cycle and then never get to the blast because I feel responsible to do these two things. But if this other thing happens, then it happens. And it's not even what you like to do and what you don't like to do. I know a lot of people that don't like to do their saviors. It doesn't always feel nice to do saviors, but they feel responsible to do it. And so therefore they do it. So you don't have to like it for it to be your savior. You just feel responsible for it. In fact, a lot of times people will complain about their saviors because of that responsibility that they feel. So the other really interesting thing when it comes to saviors and demons is something that is very observable, and it's sometimes you can hide it, but sometimes you cannot. And what leaks out are these emotional states. This is the most interesting thing to me. And I think it's because I'm now starting to understand emotional states, whereas before it was something like a hidden and a mystery to me. But now I'm starting to understand them a little bit better in myself and in others. And so when I see it happen in real life and on videos and interviews and things like that, it's like, wow, okay, there it is right there. It's almost like you get to become a detective, almost like you get to become a lie detector. It's kind of weird to say it that way because the person doesn't know that they're lying. I mean, don't necessarily take it like that person doesn't merely mean that they're lying. Let's go and attack them. No, we're all doing this. We all are doing this, and a lot of times not knowing it. And so let's kind of look a little bit into these states. For a savior state, we have what is called baseline. It would be calm. This is easy, and okay, fine, we'll talk about this. It's kind of boring for me. Now, everybody's baseline is a little bit different. So you can't necessarily look for the same baseline in everybody. You just have to be able to identify a person's baseline. And so somebody's baseline might be more of upgoing and upbeat, and this is like their normal way of speaking, versus somebody else might be their normal baseline is a little bit slower and just not as forceful with the energy. And that just might be how they normally are talking, just natural, normal talk, the baseline. It also is like not only in like how they talk, the volume or the pace or the cadence, but it could also be, like I said, kind of like their attitude towards what they're talking about. It could be, all right, fine, here we go. Let's just go and let's just talk about it. Versus what we would call about these demon emotional states would be spikes. So they could be spikes going up or they could be spikes going down. And so maybe you have like the person who's normally like the one that is just here we go, I'm talking. Then all of a sudden they get so quiet, or maybe they get so serious when something wasn't that serious before. There's a change, and it's rather interesting to see when it happens. So it could be a change in maybe the pace of their speech. It could be a change in the volume. It could just be a change of like, it's kind of hard to describe, but there's like this awkwardness that it's kind of like you innately feel for them because you're like, oh, that's kind of what, they're not quite acting normal. Like even if you can't explain it. So like for me, I have a hard time understanding emotional states, but you can notice the difference. Something has changed, and that's what you're going to look for. And so here's just a couple of examples that I could come up off the top of my head. Dave and Chan also have some examples of this change of states. Oh, I am grateful for having a loving and forgiving wife. Well, thank you. That was very nice. This is what I'm telling myself. I have a growth mindset to cleaning the house and finding the best way to organize things. Of awkwardness. Yes, awkward is a great way to describe it. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was a phrase that we use. Dave and Chan have a really good visual image of it. These tidal waves. tidal wave of the demon coming at you, coming for you, because you have just not taken the time to think about it, to engage it, whatever that demon is. And a lot of times we're living in Savior land and we're all over here and we're kind of ignoring what's happening with the demon side. We'll get a wave of we've ignored something for so long that it's kind of come up. You can't get away from it now. You've tried to get away from it for so long, but now it's there and you have to deal with it. And I just recently read somebody else's take of it, and they were describing it to taking out the trash. If your demon involves you taking out the trash, I mean, this is part of life, right? We need to take out the trash. We need to take time to take the trash out every week, let's say. But if it's your demon, you don't feel responsible to do it. So it's like, let it stay over there. Someone else will take care of it. And guess what? That trash is just going to keep piling up until it's no longer habitable in your house. And so that's just another visual of, in this case, it's really the stink of what you have created because you have kind of refused to take out the trash. I have Savior TE and Demon FI. And so what that means is my taking out the trash involves with me building up my own sense of self and my own identity. I have relied on others to do that for me. With this particular demon, it has not come to get me for a long time because I could get away with living out there in the world without really having to think about my own identity because I just let other people tell me who I was. When I am looking at my house in my mind, and I see all the garbage that I have not taken out because I've not taken the time to build my own sense of identity, to really understand who I am, to even like be okay with wrestling with things about myself. There's a lot of mess up there that no one has had to see, and I've just been plugging along thinking everything was fine. So on the flip side, if let's say you have Savior FI and then Demon TE. Your tidal wave is you are spending a lot of time thinking about what your values are, who you are as a person. You have maybe a better sense, more developed sense of who you are. You're basically saying to yourself, my responsibility is to understand what I think and how I feel and all that. And I'm going to kind of ignore what other people think and feel and that kind of thing because, somebody else will do it. But when you do interact with the tribe, then it hasn't been happening that often. So most likely when it does happen, it's going to not necessarily be that wonderful. Like it won't live up to the expectations in your mind because it's like, oh, I have this great idea. I've thought about it so much and I just can't wait for them to hear it. And then they're like, wait a minute, you haven't come to us for how long and now you have this idea and you haven't even checked in with us. And it's like all that garbage of, in this case, it's kind of like a check-in with others to see, oh, what do you think about this? Okay, all right, let me bring it back and then I'll do some stuff with it. Oh, and let me take it out again. What do you guys think? Okay. It's that balance. There's the waves because it's like spending so much time on the garden, but then not enough time taking out the trash. Well, that is our video for this week on Saviors and Demons. I hope that you learned a little bit more about it and that you will join me next time. Have a wonderful week and goodbye. When we're talking about a savior, let me back it up. Back it up. How am I going to cut this down? I feel like there's a lot of good stuff. Some of my ramblings. Don't need to hear the ramblings.